Welcome once again to another exciting episode of The Traveling Troubadour, the podcast that follows the lives of musicians who successfully toured the world, playing the music everyone knows and loves. I'm your host, Jason Perno, and our next guest comes from England. Her name is Sue Ballingall. Sue, welcome to the show. You're actually our first female guest, which is quite exciting. So why don't you start out by telling our viewers a little bit about yourself, where you grew up and how you first got into music?
I was born and grew up in the north of England, close to Scotland. So I'm half Scottish. I got into music at a very early age. I mean, just from playing the piano, you know, my parents had one. And so when I was kind of 3-4 years old, that's when I started tinkering around and realizing that I was really, you know, into it. I mean, I was always doing that. So then when I was kind of 5 or 6, my brother, who was a lot older than me, he was 16 when I was born, he gave me a little record player. And that was the start of a kind of obsession with listening and playing music. So I would just, you know, constantly explore music, go through his records and realize that I could learn, you know, how to play tunes on the piano that I had been listening to. So that was kind of my early, you know, exploration into music.
Did you move on to other instruments after that?
Yeah, at school I played the flute, but I mean, that wasn't... And then I started playing drums, so kind of jump ahead a little bit. I think my brother gave me a guitar when I was about 9, 10-ish. And it was an old acoustic guitar, and I used to learn. I think the first thing I ever learned was Paint It Black by the Stones on that, just working it out by ear, you know. And then when I was about 14 or so, I developed a bit of a passion for the drums. And then when I was 15, I bought my first drum kit and started a band. And by that time, I was kind of influenced by a lot of kind of post-punk, punk, new wave kind of stuff. There was a DJ in the UK called John Peel, and I think it's a very common story that a lot of musicians of that era were just fixated by listening to John Peel every night and just taping, you know, the shows and stuff. And so I had that kind of interest going on, and I started a punk band when I was about 15, and I played the drums in that band initially, and I used to, you know, sort of bunk off school to go to rehearsals and get drunk. And so that was my first kind of foray into being in a band. And yeah, I mean, I think we were pretty bad, but we were super enthusiastic about it.
I think that's you've described most people around that age.
Yeah, that's what we all did.
Playing in a garage, sounding like shit, and just having the time of your life.
Yeah, it was fun.
How did you eventually get into becoming a troubadour?
Well, I think that was kind of born pretty quickly out of that period, because when I was, 16, I think, I hitchhiked up to Edinburgh when the festival was on, and I took my guitar with me, and I was busking by that point. So I really got into busking, around that time, like 16, 17, 18 kind of thing. And I realized, importantly, that if I had my guitar with me, I was going to eat and find a place to live. So
how did you find busking at that age?
I didn't really think twice about it. It just seemed like very easy. And, I just thought, okay, I can make money straight away. As long as I've got my guitar with me, I can make some money, and I'm not going to starve.
Would you say that your primary motivation then at that point was just to sort of use music as a way to travel and to move around?
I wouldn't say that had been the, initial driving force, but it was a realization that was a kind of side effect of it, and a really good one. So it just kind of, compounded the idea that it was a good thing to do, I guess, and that I would meet a lot of interesting people doing it, and it seemed like a very cool thing to do as well. It attracted people, and that was a nice feeling, I think. I met my first manager. I met when I was about 16 or 17, and he saw me busking, came up and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about recording?" And that was the start of a kind of 5-year management contract where I recorded, first of all an EP and then some other stuff, and had some radio interviews, gotten in a local kind of sense. So it was just a continuing process, because I was writing songs at that point. So it just seemed like a very natural progression to what was happening.
What was the name of your first EP?
It was called Another View.
Another View. And how old were you when you made that?
I think I was 18.
18
when I made that. Mm.
And so, more or less, were you starting out as an original artist or as a cover artist, or a little bit of both?
It was both, because when I was busking, I was very much doing covers and all the usual stuff, and like Bob Dylan and all of that, and some I was really into some of the punk stuff, so the Clash and things like that I would throw in, and Bob Marley, and I would do some of my originals, but I think I've always seen it as a very separate thing in a way, because it's a very common experience, I think, to not get many well-paid gigs doing originals. So it's, on the one hand, you kind of have to do the covers, and I've always liked it as well. So
how did you move on then from working and busking around the UK to getting more paid troubadour-style gigs in other countries?
Yeah, well, that would be a big jump forward, I think. The travelling came a bit later. I spent a lot of years, doing session work and stuff like that, and then moving to London, and I worked as a songwriter for a while for a company, and I even did programming ringtones and all kinds of stuff, really. And I had a son, so I was kind of bringing him up, and I was also teaching a little bit. So all of the stuff that I was doing was kind of around music, but obviously I had that stable period of bringing my son up, and I wasn't doing a lot of traveling at that point, a little bit. But it was only when he grew up, and then I kind of thought, okay, what do I really want to do now? I want to travel and I want to play. And it was like getting back to, it was kind of like when your life goes in a full circle and you think, okay, it was there all the time, I just had to kind of do it. So I think that's when I really started, really traveling and playing, as doing a lot of things abroad and traveling.
When you have a family, especially in this lifestyle as a troubadour, I'm going through what you just described. I'm going through that now. I have a 7-year-old that's just about to turn 8. And so I started out in my mid-20s playing in Europe and Switzerland and all over Scandinavia and so on. And then when I finally met the woman I was getting married to and we had a child, then it hit me that I need to give some more stability to my family. So I went back to school, got my master's. And so that's why now I'm sort of, I guess you could say, semi-retired. And you could argue, though, there's pros and cons to having children when you're young.
Yeah.
And I think when I look at my friends who had kids when they were like 18, they're, by the time they were 36, their kids were pretty much adults and they already had a second life. where they can go out and think what they want. And it sounds a little bit like that's what you had.
Totally, absolutely. When my son left home, I left home as well. And then I kind of did a house sitting for like a couple of years. I was just in my car, going from house to house, like really traveling, just really, playing and traveling and not having a place, because I had kind of done that for quite a while. And I think I just wanted to get some level of freedom going on. And I did, I kind of cut loose from a lot of that stuff, and it was just great. So I did have a new life, and it was just felt really good, felt really fun. It still does,
right?
Apart from
Liberating.
this last year. Yeah, very much so. Well, that's how I ended up moving to Denmark as well.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that. How did you, what was your way in to Denmark?
Well, I found Neil Brophy, as you've already interviewed him, and his agency was just like a kind of godsend to me. And I think the first things I was doing for him was I did some cruises, and between Sweden and
Finland
and Estonia.
Oh, Estonia. Okay.
Yeah. And I've done the Finnish ones as well also, and I've done like Norway and Germany and all of that. So I kind of did some cruises for him, and he just said, do you want to move to, do you want to work in Denmark? And I was like, yeah, great. So started coming to Denmark, immediately fell in love with Aarhus. And a year later, I just moved here. So it was actually so beautiful to move somewhere because you just fell in love with the place rather than I've got to be there for this reason, or I have to stay here for this reason. It was like it felt really nice to do that. A
lot of the musicians, at least the ones that I know, that end up settling in Denmark, myself included, there's always a woman involved. So, did you come just completely on your own, or did you find like a Danish guy, or what's the deal?
I'd listened to this Gavin de Graw masterclass. He was talking to some students, and he said that his mother had told him once, just go where the love is. And it kind of struck a chord with me, and I kind of applied it to my situation. And
I'm going to say something that might actually shock you. I grew up with Gavin. I knew him personally. Oh, okay. My mother and his mother were nurses, and they used to work together. And he was a huge inspiration for me because he was one of the few people in my hometown or my area that proved that you could break through this sort of invisible ceiling and reach the stars. And of course, he was a super, super talented guy. And I had a number of talks after he became famous. He played in front of 40,000 people in Tivoli. And I remember getting there and talking to him and asking him all these questions. Man, you're famous, and what's it like? It's got to be the most amazing feeling in the world. I have to know. And he was just like, well, actually, it's a lot less than I thought it would be. Yeah. They were just completely shocked because he was talking about how everything, you get to one level and it's not enough. You have to then go to the next level and up and up and up. And it's all about selling seats and paying off promoters. And he painted a totally different picture. But it was fascinating to see somebody actually knew and grew up with go to this level. And so, when I saw the other day you were playing a Gavin de Graw song, I was like, oh, wow, that's cool.
That's right. And he's not an artist that I have been deeply, deeply into, over a long period of time, but just some of the things that he's done and said have been really kind of on the money for me, and like I say, that particular thing really struck a chord with me, and it made sense. And so, he's been a bit inspirational in that sense.
That's really cool. So have you been anywhere else outside? You talked about the cruise ships. You talked about falling in love with Aarhus. Did you try any other countries?
Yeah, I mean, I spent some time in Malaysia. That was amazing. I was playing over there for a few months, and
Well, that's
you know,
exciting.
it was just incredible. I mean, it actually happened at a very difficult time in my life, but the overriding feeling of that time was that I really had to get away and do that,
How did you end up there?
through an agent. I've always worked through agents and stuff, and it was just I'd been to Malaysia once before that, actually, with a band that I had. And we were asked to go over for a week to this big opening. They wanted to have a sort of Silicon Valley event, and they wanted a European band to kind of merge with their thing, So for some reason, our band got chosen, and it was very nice. And they treated us very well for a week. And then a little while after that, maybe a year or two after that, actually, I got asked to go back on my own to play, and that was for 3 months. And so for 3 months, I was at this incredible place, and and met some amazing, musicians, and that was really good.
When you talk about that you got work through agents, how did you find them? Were you looking online? Was it word of mouth? How did you get connected, so to speak?
I guess a bit of everything, like you find online, and I was pretty good at researching, pretty good at business connections, networking. In the years when I was not traveling, when I was being a mum, I was always working in music on certain things, and I had a lot of, I had a very big network and a lot of connections. So it wasn't, I don't feel like I made a special effort in that direction. I feel like it just grew out of my, day-to-day activities of working with people and organizing things. And
I don't know if you ever went to the musician's flat in Copenhagen, if you ever got to see that. But
I heard about it, but I didn't go there.
It's notorious. But the best thing about that, for better or worse, the fact that we got to meet each other and we got to spend time connecting with one another. And I got some of the best gigs of my life through the musicians I met there. So I would say word of mouth and just knowing the right people, having a good team, having a good network is really what gets you these types of gigs. I'm really, really curious about Malaysia now, after you talking about it a little bit. And you're the first musician that I've spoken with who has any experience playing out there. What is the main reason for somebody to go to Malaysia?
For me, it was financially good for me also. But it was very much about traveling, about a new place. I was so lucky to get that. It was an incredible period of time. And
were these hotels?
It was an island, and it was like a very luxurious hotel that I was staying in for the 3 months, and I had a very light workload.
Sounds like paradise.
It was, actually, and the musicians I was playing with were just amazing people.
Wow.
And the nature, the freedom I had there. I could have people come stay with me. I had 2 friends come stay when I was there. One friend stayed for 3 weeks, and another friend came for a week. And so, to be able to kind of share those experiences. I mean, it was also a very difficult period as well. Some pretty major things happened during that period. But
you mean personally or globally?
Yes, in my personal life. Yeah.
Okay.
But the experience of that was one that will just stay with me as being an incredibly special time. So, I just think that when you're traveling on your own as a musician, it makes for quite special experiences, I think. You're not a tourist, and if you're not with somebody else, then you don't kind of get into this little
bubble.
Yes, you're really
forced to mingle with the locals. And
and you kind of attract some like really great experiences, I think. It's always been like that for me, and I love that feeling.
This is the whole reason that I like doing these podcasts, is because I get to talk about things that with each musician that are unique. And, we got to talk a little bit about Gavin DeGraw. Now we're talking a little bit about Malaysia.
Mm.
But now I want to talk a little bit about the United States. You were talking about that you made your way there. What did you do there? Where did you go?
Oh, I love the States so much. The first time I ever went to the States was because I was obsessed with an artist called Jeff Buckley.
I know him, and not personally, but I know they are.
and so I was really obsessed with him, and then I found out that, unfortunately he had already died at this point, but I found out that he was, there was like a bit of a tribute concert going on organised by his mum at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because there had been an exhibition of his there, and they were taking it down and having this concert. So I wrote to her, and I said, look, I'll make my own way over. Is there any chance I can play at the concert? Here's some of my songs. And she wrote back and said, yeah, we would love that. It would be amazing. I can organise you somewhere to stay and blah, blah, blah. So that was the first time I went to the States. And where in the States were you? Well, I went to New York, and I was staying in New York, and then we did a road trip. I ended up staying with one of the guys in Brooklyn. He was in a band that was also playing at this tribute concert organised by Jeff's mum. So that's how I'd got in touch with him, through her. And so then we did a road trip down to Cleveland, Ohio.
Yeah, out west.
And so then we, stayed there for 2-3 days, did the concert, did, everything, mingled and got to know people and met his mum, and that's just amazing. Went back to New York for a couple more days, and but the whole thing was like, incredible. Everything that happened to me from the moment even before I got off the plane was just, one magical moment after another, really. And I just...
That's a really nice thing to hear, because I am from New York originally, and, born and raised. And I've had other European friends come to New York and have a completely different experience. And so it's always nice to hear somebody say that they just loved the place.
Yeah, it was incredible.
I want to switch gears a little bit and go back to a topic that we kind of glossed over before. What is it like being a female troubadour in a predominantly male-oriented circuit?
I think it's pretty nice, actually, because, I play a lot of gigs where people say, oh, we've never had a female before, we've never had a woman doing this before. It's so great. And I get to do songs like that, maybe guys don't tackle. So I always feel like I have a slightly different repertoire, because I can do a lot of girly stuff. And guys can do girly stuff too, but, and I do a lot of, I don't sort of only do girl songs. I do across the board, obviously, but...
I do a wicked four non-blondes.
Right, yeah. So I kind of feel like maybe the material, my choices are slightly different, just because, I don't know, because I'm coming from, I'll do Beyonce, I'll do like Taylor Swift and stuff like that. And maybe guys do that too. So I would say that maybe the repertoire just is slightly different because of that. And maybe the kind of interest level is quite nice for me, because of that. And it's not that I play on it, but I'm just kind of realistic about it's like, oh, I'm not just another guy like turning up, you know.
I think it's an advantage, at least from what I've seen, that the women troubadours really benefit because people want to see women up on the stage. It's not, you know, it's not a hindrance. It's not a hindrance. It's an advantage. No. Yeah.
It's nice, I think, for people to see that. I mean, the amount of girls that come up to me and they're like, oh, wow, you know, it's so great that... And I think it's kind of, you know, it's nice for girls and guys to see girls doing it, although I kind of hate myself for saying that because honestly, I've got through the whole of my life just not registering the kind of gender, you know, differences in music because... you know, I've always just been like getting on with it and doing it. And I haven't really been, you know, moaning about it or highlighting it in any way. But since you ask, then, I don't think it's has never been a bad thing.
That's really nice to hear. Do you have any life tips from what you've learned in all of your traveling and your experiences? You know, you've done a lot of different things. You've busked. Yeah. You've done the cruise ships. You've played in Malaysia. Yeah. What have you learned that you think others could benefit from?
Plan ahead, travel light, have reliable gear, and have gear that you like to play as well. Don't skimp on having a guitar that you're not really happy with. Or
what kind of guitar are you playing?
Actually, the guitar that I'm playing, like mostly now, is called Shadow, and it's a German guitar. I've been using like slimline body acoustics, you know, like sort of very sort of slim body acoustics for ages now because I like the fact that you don't have any feedback issues with them and they're light, they're easy to travel with, and they always kind of sound the same when you plug them into any system, you know, and so that's, you know, my preference. And I think just, you know, life tips in general would be, you know, basically just be very flexible about how life is going to be, because if if something doesn't work out smoothly, just don't go into a panic about it. Just kind of be comfortable in not knowing how it's going to work out, and it always does work out.
You never know what's going to happen. Most of us don't know what's going to happen 6 months from now. Some of us will, you know, we book ahead, but quite often you're flying by the seat of your pants and you have to be comfortable with not knowing where you might be 6 months from now or a year from now, and just go with it. And if you're a free spirit, like most of us are, you actually embrace that. You like the uncertainty.
I like it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, real quick, out of all the things you've done, do you have any amusing stories or anecdotes that you'd like to share?
It's a funny one, that, isn't it? Because, you know, all the funny things are X-rated, aren't they?
Yeah. And I have to say, it's a relief to hear that coming also from a female musician, because... I work in IT now.
I'm going to have to tell you those things in private. Yeah. You know.
Wait, I was going to say, I work in IT now. Yeah. And I'm surrounded by nerds. Right. And every once in a while, there's a temptation to bring up some of the things that I did on the road. And that little internal sensor just doesn't always go off. And I remember I've said some things that just had jaws on the floor dropping. Yeah. And you can see that it offends certain people, sometimes, especially, unfortunately, younger female graduates who have never gotten out, never done any, and like, I'm like, oh, wow, I'm just being me. And, you know, I'm coming from a world where I'm surrounded by musicians who are all like me, including female troubadours as well, who we can all sit and tell these stories and laugh about them, share pictures even in videos sometimes.
Exactly.
You know? And you go into another part of society and you find out this is really frowned upon. They just
yeah,
they don't want to hear that stuff. It's just for us. Yeah.
And you realize how far out it is halfway through the story of telling it. You're like, oh shit, I shouldn't have started this one, you know. So I'm not going to start anything like that
we'll keep
now.
It clean.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, I think the stories that I would rather kind of dwell on are the ones of, you know, inspiration and kindness and that kind of come up a lot in, especially I think the musical community. You know, it's a very generous and open kind of group of people, I think, you know, who, especially people who travel around and play music. And, you know, I've just been struck over and over and over again by people's kindness and generosity in this business. When I went to the States for the first time, actually, this is a very nice story. And I was, you know, going for the Jeff Buckley concert, and I was playing in New York. In Cleveland, and I went to New York, and within half an hour of meeting the guy that I was staying with, we were on a rooftop in Brooklyn having a beer and playing each other Jeff Buckley songs, and he gave me a Gibson guitar to take
Just,
back with me.
Gave you a Gibson guitar?
Yeah, because I told him, I said, oh, I was going to buy a guitar when I was here, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do that now. You know, I'd spent a bit of money, and he went, hang on a second, I have a guitar you can have. And I was like, what? And literally I'd known this guy for an hour, and he gave me this Gibson electric guitar, and he said it was called the Paul. It wasn't a Les Paul, it was the Paul, like a sort of a different type. And he said, don't ever sell this guitar, just give it away if you don't want to use it anymore.
Wow, like a pay it forward kind of thing.
Yeah, it was that. So then I ended up playing in Switzerland with a very nice friend of mine called Al, and he was looking for a Gibson. I really liked a Fender that he had. We swapped, and then he swapped that guitar for a guitar that he then wanted a couple of years later. And so, you know, it's things like that I just love those kind of, you know, stories, really. And there are many things like that, and I just, you know, I treasure those.
One of the best things about being a troubadour is that because you touch so many people's lives, and sometimes in ways that we don't even know, because you're playing in a bar, especially a really packed bar, and there could be that one person in the corner who's just really touched by what you're doing, and they just never said anything. But you get glimpses of it every now and then, because you see people who will come up to you and they'll say, I remember, for example, when I'm in Switzerland, somebody owns a ski shop, and they're like, you know, come to my ski shop. I'll give you a pair of skis that you can rent for the day. No charge. Or come to my sauna. I'm the manager over here in this spa. You can come use it for free.
Yeah.
Come to this club. I'll get you in. And I never had to pay for anything. And that was just the privilege.
Oh, that's another good thing. Yeah. Never have to pay for anything, right?
And you just, you know, you feel so grateful. And it's important to remember to show that appreciation to the people who are doing these things for you, because it's very easy to get spoiled and to kind of expect it. And you think just as a musician who's on a small little troubadour circuit can get a big head, it becomes really easy to understand why the Justin Biebers of the world and these other young celebrities can get extremely spoiled.
And you get these moments all the time, don't you, where people get very touched by your music. And this guy came up to me on a cruise once, and he was crying, and he told me, you know, that he had been in the war in Afghanistan, and he was traumatized by it, and he had never been able to speak about some of the things that he had seen. And it was only like when he listened to me, he said, I have to tell you some like this because there's nobody I can tell that. And he told me, a couple of things, and I just listened. And but it was just, the fact that you don't know that person, and then they just, through the music, they just come up to you and they tell you some really personal stuff, and they're like,
just
obviously
opens them right up.
Exactly. And I love that, because actually what I really want to do most is just kind of touch people.
Yeah.
Not,
not in a bad way.
Dirty way. Not now,
I got you.
anyway.
But we were both thinking the same thing. Sometimes things you sing, they don't necessarily touch people in the right way. I remember singing the theme to Titanic when I was on one of the cruise ships. And
bad move.
Well, the thing is that, so I'm just doing it as a joke because the boat was like rocking back and forth and people were getting like nauseous and stuff, and we were out in the Baltic Sea, and I was on one of these Viking Line cruise ships, and I think the name of the boat was the Amarella. And suddenly one of the guys working on the boat stopped and he said, "Don't do that. Don't play that song." And I was like, "All right, yeah, no problem." And then he's like, you remember that boat, the one from Estonia? I think it was called the Estonia.
It was, the Estonia.
And he said, "We were the first boat to arrive to respond. This boat you're playing on, we responded to that, and." I don't know if it was something like 900 people died or 1,200 people.
Yeah, it was
like
a
lot of people died, and he said that was the worst night of my life. Don't ever play that song again. I was like, wow, sorry.
Yeah.
So you never know.
That's like the kind of cruise version of mentioning Macbeth.
Yeah. Well, that about wraps it up for this week's podcast. I want to thank once again our special guest, Sue Ballingall, for coming on the show to share her journey with us. If you like what you heard and you want to learn more, please go to Amazon and pick up your copy of Troubadour, a musician's guide to touring Europe as a cover artist. Going to take you out now with an original song from Sue. It's called Reel Me In. Thanks again, and see you next time.
In every dream I set sail on a big white boat. Just a means of escape, give my heart some hope. But I'm driftwood in the ocean, and I'm heading for the storm. Will I survive? Can you keep me from drowning? Will you throw me a line to keep me alive? To keep me alive? Am I still alive? You reel me in, the harder I spin, the more you ground me. As we begin, the love that I'm in revolves around me. The air is cold inside my room, so I close the door. But there's a world outside, and soon I will need to thaw. And I dream that I'm falling, but You reel